In my book, Why I'm Not a Christian, I basically outline and explain in detail 4 reasons why I'm not a Christian. And if those reasons were met in the way that I explain in the book, that I would become a Christian. But the evidence just doesn't pan out. And basically it comes down to God is silent, God is inert, we have the wrong evidence, and we have the wrong universe. And those are the 4 things, and I explain each one of them. The first is that God is silent. I mean, if God really cared about us and wanted us to believe the right things and go on the right path, he would tell all of us himself. He wouldn't need Christian missionaries to do it. And he would have been telling us as soon as we had language, right? As soon as we could understand. So we would have, from the first shaman 40,000 years ago, in every culture everywhere, God's gospel would have been preached to them by God himself. He wouldn't need intermediaries. And so we would be able to confirm that, yes, there's this guy somewhere who is giving us all the same information. And so we would know what that information is. And we would still have the freedom to reject that message or not care about it or whatever, but we would all agree on what the message was. There wouldn't be disagreements on it. And every little thing that we'd be able to ask him questions, like say, so what is your position on abortion, right? And he would give us all the same answer, and so we could confirm, yeah, this God guy, that's what he said. You're right. So if there was a God like that, and certainly if I were in a position of a deity like that, I would feel that it would be profoundly immoral of me to not communicate with my subjects, to let them know the things they need to know, be there for them to answer their questions, and so on if they asked. The fact that God doesn't do that, there's no communications from God, no reliable, consistent communications. There's people who claim to talk to God, but everybody who does that gets different messages. So we're clearly not dealing with a consistent, caring deity in that respect. So the silence of God is a big problem. The other is that God is inert. He doesn't do anything. And it's not that he doesn't do any specific thing. You could pick any particular thing you think God should do and give an excuse for why he wouldn't do that. But he doesn't do anything. The odds that he would do nothing whatsoever. I mean, if he did at least some things consistently, we could debate about whether he cared about us, or we could debate about how powerful he was or anything. But we would all agree that he existed and that he was interfering in the world in certain ways. We might even be able to talk about how he's helping us and things like that.
What about all the miracles that everybody constantly tells me that they prayed for something and then it happened?
Well, yeah, when those things happen, the praying for something, that's a correlation fallacy. Correlation is not causation. Lucky things happen to everybody, right? And some of those things are going to inevitably happen. To give you an example, if let's say it's something that's 1,000,000 to 1 odds against it happening, 1,000,000 to 1 odds against it happening like soon after you prayed for it. Well, there's 300 million people in the U.S. alone, so that means that those events, just by chance alone, are going to occur to 300 people a year, right? So that's a lot of people. So you could find 300 witnesses that say, yeah, 1,000,000 to 1 odds, I prayed for it and it happened. Yeah, statistically, that we know that's going to happen anyway, even if there's no God, right? So when people understand stats and statistics and math, then those kinds of claims go away. And
so you think if people are kind of ignoring the times when they pray and it doesn't happen?
That's another issue. And then, of course, there's also claims that are ridiculous. And then when we go investigate them, they turn out to not pan out. That's why when you hear these, like, oh, there's these miracles, this resurrection and all this stuff that I heard about, yeah, you have to go like into the jungles of Africa to go find these claims, exactly where scientists can't really check them, where there isn't documentation, where there aren't doctors and so forth to confirm that there's no hijinks going on. The fact that you have to go to places where you can't check the facts, and those are the only places you ever find these miracle claims, that's suspect right there. But what I'm talking about are more direct things. So, for example, these mass shootings, for example, the recent one where a guy goes in and basically murders 20, 30 kids. Why would a God let that happen? That's pointless. Certainly, at the very least, he could stop the guy and say, hey, let's have a conversation. If the guy's insane, God could cure his illness and say, okay, problem solved. And if, even despite all that, the guy still insists on going, he could turn the bullets into popcorn and say, sorry, I'm not letting you do that. There's lots of things that God could do, and I talk about how, for example, how our friends, how our fathers, our mothers, people we know who care about us, what they do for us when we need help, when we ask for help. God doesn't do any of that. He doesn't act like a caring parent. He doesn't act like a caring friend. He doesn't engage with us in the world. He doesn't do anything to right injustices or any of the things that we would expect
so you're saying that if I notice in your book, too, you used an example of if you had the power to intervene to stop somebody being kidnapped or tortured or whatever and didn't do anything, how would people judge you?
Yeah, and it's not just how would I judge myself? I mean, I would feel awful about myself. Why would I do something? Why would I be so insensitive to that? And people will come up with apologetical answers to that, but I also address those in the book. And generally, the immediate rationalization is, well, God can't stop everything, because then the world would be boring. It's like, Yeah, but you don't need women's breasts being chopped off in the Congo for there to be struggle and things that we need to learn. We don't need these horrific things happening. We don't need to have mass shooters murdering dozens of kids. We don't need those things. It's not like if we got rid of those things, the world would be boring. So these kinds of arguments, you really need to use your imagination and think them through. And I think a problem I often run into with Christians is they either don't have a good imagination or they aren't using it. Because if you really used your imagination, you could imagine and envision a world that's just as exciting and has learning struggles and all of the things we would need for a good life without the horrific injustices that pervade the world. And obviously they must exist if you think you're going to heaven and heaven is going to be any better than this place. Are there mass shootings in heaven? So is heaven going to be boring? Is that going to be an awful place to live? So you got to really reason this through. If heaven's going to be a great place to live, then there's a better world we could make of this world. And many other points I make in the book. So that the God is inert and God is silent, those are big problems. The Christian thesis that God cares about us doesn't hold up in the face of that evidence. And the other is the wrong evidence. We just don't have the kind of evidence we would need to confirm this. The kind of evidence we have is the same kind of evidence we have for all other religions and all other myths and so on. If there was a real God, he would give us much better evidence than that, and it would be the Christian God especially could give us really good evidence where it was clear. And then the thing that people find surprising, I guess, is the fourth reason, which is it's the wrong universe. This isn't the universe that a Christian God would make. It's exactly the universe we would have if there was no God, which is... People say, what? How is that possible? But if you think about it, just for example, I talk about many other examples in the book, but just as one of the examples, if there is no God, and let's just use our imaginations for a moment, if there is no God, but we did come to exist, that somehow, some non-God way, the universe came to exist and we came to exist, what universe would we see in that case? Now we know that we've evolved for billions of years from single-celled organisms. We can confirm that extensively scientifically. And the single-celled organisms, the earliest, simplest versions of them, had to have been a chemical accident. There had to be the chemicals just randomly came together and just happened to produce a self-replicator. And we know that that's very improbable, right? So that kind of thing is not just going to happen every day. So the only way it could happen without a God doing it, without an intelligent engineer doing it, is if there were tons and tons of trials. It's like winning a lottery. If the winning lottery may be 1 in a million chance, that's really low. But if 1 million people play, the probability that someone's going to win the lottery is high. In fact, it's very high. And so what we would expect is we would have to see a vast universe, a universe that's really old with tons of planets and stars that has been experimenting with chemistry on vast scales for vast periods of time. That's the only universe that would randomly kick up life. That's the only kind of universe that would randomly kick up life. So the universe we would expect to see if there was no God is a universe that's vastly old, vastly large, and filled with vast quantities of stuff. And that's exactly the universe we see. There's billions of galaxies, billions of planets. The universe has been around for billions of years, and it's billions of light years across. And so that's an example of the kind of universe we would expect to see if there was no God. The kind of universe we would expect to see if there was a God is a universe that was actually designed by a God. You wouldn't need a vast age. You wouldn't need a vast universe. We wouldn't need evolution. Really, Genesis would be confirmed scientifically. We would confirm that the Earth was created 6,000 or 10,000 years ago. We'd confirm that all species were created at the same time. We would be able to verify all of these things scientifically. There wouldn't be billions of galaxies. What use would God have for all of that? It's not necessary. There are lots of things that he could do, that he could have the universe governed morally, for example, that there could be a moral law like karma or something, so that if someone, for example, one example I give is the more evil that you are in your behavior and stuff, the more sickly and vulnerable you become. Whereas if you're the more righteous and the more kind and compassionate and honest you are, the more invulnerable you are to injury and illness. Now, if we had a law like that, a law of physics like that, that would really prove moral governance of the universe. And that would be something that couldn't exist unless there was some sort of deity imbuing the universe with this understanding of this moral law that made this happen. So we would expect not necessarily that specific universe, but something like that. There would be a universe that looked like a universe created by a God, and not a universe that looks exactly like we would expect if there was no God at all.
Well, scientists say that something can't come from nothing, and therefore the start of the universe had to have been started by God.
Right. So something can't come from nothing is the claim there. Yeah, we don't actually know that. I mean, it's funny. If you're going to say that something can't come from nothing, you're basically describing a law of physics, which is something. So if there really is nothing, then even that law of physics can't apply, right? So the idea that nothing can't become something else, if there's really nothing, then that law doesn't apply either. So anything can happen. I mean, if there's really nothing, if everything began with nothing, then all bets are off. We have no idea what could occur, what could pop out of that nothing, because there's no laws of physics that exist that govern what's going to happen. So that's one immediate problem with it. Another problem is we don't really know that it came from nothing, because as far as we know, there could always have been something. This is a common confusion among Christians, is that we can trace back our universe, the universe we're in, back to a Big Bang, but we can't go any further back from that. We don't have any evidence or any access to what happened before that. So we don't know if there was nothing before that. There may have been all kinds of things before that. There are many hypotheses about how there could have been universes before that, and that we are a product of those universes. And it could be universes all the way down, as far as we know. And there are apologetical attempts to argue that you can't have a past infinite set, but you really can. I mean, it actually is possible that you could have an infinite string of stuff, and it's just gone through cycles, or different universes have sprouted out of different other universes, and so on. I mean, it is entirely possible. We just don't know, and so you can't argue from what we don't know to a conclusion like, well, it must have been God. Well, we don't know that. If it was God, we would have better evidence of it.
It also kind of seems that if that's the logic they're using to prove God, well then they've just stepped back from the creation of the universe to then, well, who created God?
Right. Yeah. And then, of course, they'll say that, well, God always existed. Well, that's what I'm talking about, the universe. If God can always exist, the universe can always exist. Or they'll say, well, God necessarily exists. Well, maybe there's something non-God-like that necessarily exists that did it instead. And other things you could point out is that a God is massively complex, as a really complex explanation for something, because if you think of all the random minds that you could grab out of all possible minds to get one that was infinitely powerful and infinitely wise and infinitely knowledgeable and all of that, that's like the least probable mind you're going to get.